Hey guys. Okay, so earlier today I actually popped out to the BAAA, Building Approvals and Advice Office, and I had a really meaty and robust conversation with Mick Tyrrell and Mitchell Walsh about these new planning scheme amendments. Like, it's going to make me sound so nerdy, but it was so much fun to sit there with Mitch in particular because he'd already deep dived to my sort of level, and to just sit there and go, dude, have you thought about this? And wait, what does that mean? And could it mean this? And wait, does that mean that? Does that mean that's where it's going? And wait. So yeah, really embarrassing to admit it, but it was a lot of fun to actually just problem solve and work it all through. Anyway, following from that conversation, I kind of reflected on the videos that I put out this morning. So I was supposed to do one video that went out, but unfortunately, thanks to Instagram's video limit, I had to break it up into a part 1 and part 2 video. But since releasing those videos, I was just like, oh, my thoughts evolved. There's a couple of things that I don't think I said were quite right. I've now got some additional points that I think I need to make to help people in their own thought process and all of that sort of stuff. So first things first, if you haven't yet seen the part 1 and part 2 videos, I do encourage you to jump on our Instagram grid and check them out. We will get them up on YouTube, hopefully later today, if not tomorrow. Instagram's obviously the priority. So go check them out because everything I'm going to talk about in this video here is not going to make any sense if you haven't watched those previous videos. Once you've got those previous videos behind you, then this is kind of, like I said, the next step. It's essentially me sharing the next step in my thought process. Like with last time, I have scribbled down some notes quickly because I do want to make sure that I stay on track and I don't waffle too much. I'm not breaking this video up into a part 1, part 2. It is going to fit under that Instagram limit. So the first thing I want to share is that I intentionally, and this came up through a few different conversations, but mainly through this BAAA conversation, I've intentionally omitted certain things from the video that I did this morning. So I omitted the things that I thought weren't genuine headliners in the respect that they weren't going to have a tangible, meaty kind of impact on day-to-day life. So for example, when it comes to blocks less than 10 meters in width, you can now, instead of doing a 4 meter wide crossover driveway, it's now going to be a 2.5 meter crossover. Yes, that is going to have an impact, but let's be real, the majority of our blocks out there at this point in time aren't under 10 meters in width, and therefore it's not going to just have this massive impact across the board. So going to the future, yes, definitely it's going to become something that's more impactful, let's just say, but right here, right now, it doesn't qualify as a headliner. The other thing was the separation distance. So when it comes to granny flats, they are looking at reducing it. Well, not looking, yeah, they are looking, it's still proposed draft amendments. They are proposing to reduce it from 20 meters maximum separation distance to 10 meters where it's on a residential block. Initially, I looked at that and I was like, oh, that's big. And then I went, wait, a residential block, LDR zone, character residential zone, typically 405, 450 square meters. Not many situations, if any, where you're going to have a greater separation between the primary dwelling and the secondary dwelling or a separation distance that exceeds 10 meters. So let's be real. Yes, it's a change, but it's not an impactful change. Let's ditch that. Or the one Mitch goes, did you see when it comes to that demolition code, or the traditional building character demolition code, they're going to ask for an RPQ report every time you propose demolition. And I was like, yeah, dude, when I saw that, I was like, WTF? If you're doing a single window now, we're going to trigger this full structural report. Like, what the heck? And then I thought through a bit more and I was like, hold on a sec. If you're triggering assessment and application for demolition, at the end of the day, what difference does it really make from an outcome perspective, whether you trigger assessment against the acceptable outcome or the performance outcome? Sure, it looks a little bit less shiny, nice. If you go in performance outcome, it's not as clean, all of that sort of stuff. It's a little bit more work from a planning perspective, but I don't think it's actually going to change the outcome. So yes, it's a change to the scheme. Yes, on face value, you go WTF, but when you think it through, like, all it means is us town planners need to do a performance justification that says this is not reasonable or relevant in this situation because the scale of works, blah, 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 blah. So yeah, that was one of those ones that I just thought, nah, doesn't make the cut for the headliner qualification. So yeah, there's a heap of stuff when you guys go through, and I'm not going for a second pretend that I picked up on everything, but there'll be a heap of stuff that you go, why didn't she raise this? This seems like a big change. What I'd like you to do is ask how many scenarios would that actually impact on, or what are the consequences or workarounds for that sort of scenario? And then it might help you understand why I intentionally excluded that stuff. Because the video, what was it, over 30 minutes in the end that I did, that I had to break up, it was long enough on that already. I didn't need to whack all that extra stuff in there. So yeah, there is the point of what I'm trying to say here is there was a bucket load of additional stuff that I didn't include in that video that you will come across. Next thing I want to clarify is citing variations. So in this morning's video, I was like, one of the amazing things that I wanted to bow down and praise council for was the fact that they'd included or copied and pasted the QHC/QDC. Use those terms interchangeably at this point. If you don't know what they are, go back and watch the previous videos. but they were going to basically copy paste the setback requirements and the site cover requirements into the planning scheme, more specifically into the dwelling house code. I haven't had enough coffee this morning. I've been go, trying to sort out that video this morning. You can clearly see. But yeah, they were going to copy and paste it in, and therefore it was going to help reduce the number of siting variation applications that are triggered. So in a scenario where you were already triggering a DA and then doing a separate siting variation, there was going to be an opportunity to combine those two. I was like, heck yes, that's amazing. Saves fees for clients, saves confusion, blah, blah, blah. What we worked out, and it's so obvious now that I look at it, what we worked out is that the copy paste is only within the secondary dwelling / auxiliary residence requirements. So it helps because it reduces the number of SV triggers, but it also adds a layer of but if this then that type complication. So yeah, I probably jumped the gun on that statement when I said it was going to be an amazing win. I didn't really think it through. So I think in the submission that I do up this weekend, I'll be like, guys, prime opportunity. Let's clean this shit show up. Let's bring all of those requirements into the planning scheme. Let's make it nice and clear cut so that if you do a DA, you don't need the siting variation separate. It's a big ask. It's a big task. I don't think it'll get off the ground, but hey, I'll throw it in there and see what they say. Next thing we talked through was auxiliary residence. So long story short, in the definition, they've inserted this new term, aux residence. When I originally looked at it, I assumed, that could still be the case, but less and less likely after my conversation with the boys this morning, I assumed that through one of the court cases that identified this kind of little loophole gap. So there's the secondary dwelling definition, aka granny flat definition, there's a rooming accommodation definition, and I kind of thought maybe the court had identified that this use was in the middle there, and therefore it allowed the applicant to kind of play counsel and pick and choose what rules they want or something like that. And maybe counsel was like, let's plug that hole with this new term so we capture it, blah, 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 blah. It's kind of where I thought my thought process had landed at this point in time. And again, I stress my thought process through this. It's evolving. This stuff's fresh for me. So I'm going to no doubt look back in time and go, oh, I was totally wrong with that thought process. But that's where I kind of got to this morning. However, through this conversation, I was just like, we sat down and we just went, hold on a sec. Secondary dwellings as we know them today, aka separately rentable structures that can now have the second kitchen, separate laundries, all of that sort of stuff, they probably fall more into this auxiliary box going forward. And then what's left? Well, what's left is a detached or attached extension to a house that doesn't have the separate facilities. So does that mean that going forward, if this term is introduced, that secondary dwellings as we know them kind of get split into those two terms? They either became the primary dwelling extension or an auxiliary residence. As does secondary dwelling, because if you look at the fine words, it could go out this way. Does secondary dwelling then become a redundant term within the planning scheme that's like this ghost thing that's just sitting there not being used, kind of like the minor building work definition? Minor building work is defined in the planning scheme. It doesn't get called up anywhere in the planning scheme. So it's this thing that just sits there doing nothing and excites people because everyone goes, oh my God, I can apply minor building work. It's exempt. Let's see Plain 2000. We've moved on a long time since then, guys. But yeah, is secondary dwelling going to become this ghost thing that's just redundant thing that sits there that doesn't get applied? And okay, if so, why? Why are we moving to auxiliary? Is it because through the whole state government changes that happened 2 years ago, we've now identified that certain applications can slip through the cracks, so we want to bring them back to the plain scheme? Can we trigger? So we trigger. Or is it an intentional move to align with the other councils out there in terms of infrastructure charges and all of that sort of stuff? So we obviously focus on Brisbane City Council. We don't focus on the other councils out there, so I'm not up to speed with who does what. But what I've heard along the grapevine is that other councils charge for infrastructure charges for granny flats, not auxiliary, rooming accommodation, all of that sort of stuff. And that is specifically because the purpose of infrastructure charges is to help offset the additional pressure and maintenance requirements that are imposed on communal type facilities like water treatment plants, sewage pump stations, all of that sort of stuff. So if you are intensifying the use on a site, you're intensifying the pressure on those communal facilities, and therefore government bodies need to get some money somehow to be able to continue to deliver on their promise of maintaining these facilities and all of that sort of stuff. I know I'm opening a can of worms by making that statement. There's a whole conversation about housing crisis, reasonableness, all of that sort of stuff. But if we want to break it down to a real crude sort of basic level, these granny flats, as we all loosely call them, now can hold separate households. Separate households means additional pressure on infrastructure. How does Council, Queensland Urban Utilities, offset that pressure? Maybe this auxiliary term is a step in the direction of trying to introduce next year in the next resolution a charge for an auxiliary residence, which then helps them offset those costs and the pressure that's been generated through the state changes that occurred 2 years ago. Don't know. It's a conspiracy theory. Not really conspiracy. It's a rabbit hole you can dive down if you want. When we talked about it, I was like, damn, this could be right. I could just totally miss this point. I don't know. Let's park that auxiliary residence definition as a work in progress. I don't quite know what the implications are yet. I'm going to obviously ask questions, put my feelers out there, see what other people have sort of come up with, but that's one idea to ponder at the moment. Now, we've talked through why I intentionally excluded things, citing variation update, auxiliary residence update. We're now going to cover some elephants in the room. Now, in the video that I did this morning, I intentionally tiptoed around certain negative points because I don't want these videos to come across as drama queeny, negative Nelly, like I'm just trying to really shit all over council and all of that sort of stuff. Like I said in the beginning of that other video, change is always uncomfortable, it's awkward, it's not necessarily nice initially, but change is really important to help us evolve and improve. Again, the drill analogy, go back to it, people. So yeah, I want to focus on the positives and help stimulate conversation in a positive way. But having said that, I do think it is really important to address the elephant in the rooms, to acknowledge the pain points that are going to eventuate, rather than dancing around, because I think it just drags it out. It helps things blow up into a bigger drama balls than they actually need to be, etc., etc. So through the conversation I had with the boys earlier today, and I probably should mention, caught up with Annalise from AS before, and she raised some of these things too. There's probably, how many did I write down? 3 key pain points. No, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, 3 key pain points that I kind of wanted to hit head on, just address. The first one is, yes, as it stands right now, there is going to be a lot more applications that come our way within this housey sort of space. So granny flats at the rear of TBC overlay triggers a DA now. Extensions to the rear of a TBC overlay where you're stepping sideways of the core or above the roof form is going to trigger a DA now. Double width carports on TBC sites going to trigger a DA now where it's forward of the house. Where you're doing a 5.5, where you don't have a 5.5 metre setback to your carport on a small lot, you're going to trigger a DA. Now, previously, we always had that 5.5 separation distance, or separation distance between the front boundary and the garage on garages, because the thought process was when you have a garage, everyone just piles their junk in there. They use it as storerooms, which means the cars are forced out of the garage. If you don't have space on site forward of the garage for a car to park, they end up on the street, which becomes a community problem, etc., etc. So I understood the setback distance requirement when it came to garages, but that requirement has now been expanded to also cover carports. So I can see a scenario where previously you might have been able to do a 3 metre front setback because the neighbours were 3 metres off their front boundary. But in this situation, if your parking is not set back 5.5, that would trigger a DA. So there's another round of DAs we're going to trigger. And then obviously site cover. So many jobs these days go over 50% site cover. So especially on those small, teeny tiny blocks. So there's going to be another heap of applications. So yeah, I think there is no denying the fact that there is going to be a heap of applications that kind of come our way. And don't blame us, guys. Like I said in today's video, I recorded it yesterday. Today's video, I'm not sitting here celebrating going, hell yeah, make it rain. I got all this money coming through the door. I've actually got the opposite problem at the moment of trying to cull our workload to be able to ensure the customer service standards are maintained for the people that have been with me for the long journey, so the people that have been with me for at least 10 years, etc. So I'm actively trying to find ways to reduce my workload. So this is not one of those scenarios where I'm like, woohoo, bring it on, this is amazing. I'm like, how do I hide? How do I escape from all of this? So that's the first thing. Second thing is there is some very hard to measure criterion within these amendments that just leave you scratching your head just going, oh, what the hell? So the best one in particular, I just brought up on the screen before I started recording so I could actually quote it to you guys because I can't remember it. When you're applying for, so I mentioned earlier today, that when you have a block that's between the 25 and 35 metre 25 and 35 metre length requirement, there are certain scenarios where you can apply for a reduced rear setback, etc., etc. The wording to qualify says, let me just get my place here, adjacent to one side boundary that receives at least 3 hours of solar access on the winter solstice, 21st of June, for at least 50% of the private open space. I don't know how to measure that. To building designers, are you guys going to be able to easily, within your programs, sure, the people that have the advanced programs, you guys are probably going to be able to click a few buttons and it magically does the calculation. ChatGPT is probably going to help us a bit here. But for those more old school design professionals, how are you guys going to measure that? And then, yeah, when it gets to me, how am I going to check it? Am I just going to go, well, I guess it's like site cover. If you put 49% site cover on the plan, and if I look at it and go, yeah, it generally looks like about half, I tick it off. Maybe it's like that. Maybe I just go, kind of looks right. I hope it's right. Maybe I put a disclaimer in my letters. But how the certifier is going to check it, like, yeah, that requirement just there. I'm like, dude, this is going to be a nightmare. So yeah, obviously in the submission that I write on the weekend, I'm going to sit down and just kind of point out that that's going to be a bit of a management compliance nightmare. It's going to lead to a tidal wave of written requests for information for council saying, can you confirm that this complies and therefore we don't need a DA type thing. So hopefully we can get that wording potentially changed and simplified. I don't know, we'll find out. So yeah, there is quite a few of those little things. I'm going to, like I said, elephant in the room, acknowledge it, it is what it is. And then the final thing was, in terms of elephants, was the percentage chances. So Annalise in particular, she's the one that said this. She goes, you love giving percentage chance of success. And I'm like, that's how my mind operates. Like, I'm like, oh, 55% chance. But hey, if you get neighbour support, it bumps up to 80%. If you can give me 3 examples within 200 metres, it bumps it up to 90%. Like, that's the way my brain operates. So I love being able to give that real concrete kind of feedback. And she's like, what happens when this new world comes in? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I'm going to be sitting there going, I feel lost. I don't know how to operate as a town planner when I can't analyze this shit. So I think there will be a period, and this happened when City Plan 2014 was introduced. There will be a period where council has to go hard on these rules. They've spent however many years developing these rules, refining them, coming up with the thought process. If they implement all these new rules and then from day one just go, yeah, backflip, approve applications for 60% site cover, approve applications for 90% site cover, from day one, naturally there's going to be a lot of questions of, well, why did you even bother? Like, why did you spend all that time and money creating these new rules if you're not going to actually look at them? So just like when City Plan 2014 came in with the 2-story height limit, I do think there will be at least 6 months, if not 12, if not 24 months, where our new norm is these reduced building sizes and all that sort of stuff, in particular from site cover. Then as market expectations change, priorities change, all of that sort of stuff, we may start to see it go in a different direction. But yeah, definitely initially there's going to be a lot of, well, if you'd asked me 6 months ago, I would have told you this percent, but we're in no man's land or unknown territory now. I think we're going to see a crackdown, but I don't really know because we don't have the runs on the board within these new rules. Who really knows what's going to happen from here type thing. So there's going to be this real messy transition space. And again, I'm trying not to be a drama queen, trying not to drum up the negativity, all of that sort of stuff. I just want to address them head on so we can kind of go, yep, it is what it is. Get ready for it so you can manage your clients' expectations. Which leads to my last point, which is the point of all these videos, is just to say threefold. Firstly, if you actually don't like some of these things and you have genuine concerns and you can argue as to why or explain why they are problems, do a submission. You've got till Monday to voice your concerns. The next is start to consider, okay, what jobs do you have in the works? Like at the moment, double width carports, forwards of TBC houses are typically often exempt. That's going to be disappearing. Okay, well, what does that mean? Do you bring those jobs forward, lock in the BA, start all the work and process to avoid triggering a DA down the track? You've got to start thinking about these things. We've got time. Like, it's not like it's happening tomorrow. At this stage, the plan releases at the end of next year. Typically, these things can take a bit longer to sort of get off the ground, so it may be delayed. So you can start to go, okay, well, in the next 6 to 12 months, what do I do on those existing jobs? But most importantly, I just want to start people having a conversation so that in a year's time or whatever, when these rules drop, everyone's not sitting there going, if only I had known, I could have prepared for this. Like, we all saw the drama that happened when the NCC changes came in, the National Construction Code changes. Let's not have that same drama again. Let's try and be a little bit more prepared for this stuff, guys. Okay, that's enough rambling for me. That's 3 videos, 3 videos in one day. That's a lot of videos. I think that covers off everything I want to say. As I always like to say, until next time, thanks for watching.